All right, so we're back for game two. Trying to get the audio on site turned off. But we've got Brian Fred playing Watch Your Step and Tom Kelly playing Entanglements. We are already a few turns into it. We had to restart the stream for the Wi-Fi, so hopefully we've got some better quality. It looks pretty good so far in the stream. But this is the IE deck that we kind of expected, the same kind of build.
Indeed, it's absolutely not going to be. I mean, it's Tom Kelly, excuse me. He doesn't believe in surprise or any of that nonsense. He believes in solid play.
All right, so just to recap, we missed the beginning with the stream, but we've got Piet already at the Executor docking bay. We've got Justice out, Monkey and Blizzard, and looks like a Vader on there.
Indeed. So we pick up this game a couple of turns in. I talked to Tom Kelly specifically about this matchup. He feels, no surprise, that IE has the advantage in this matchup.
And this is the Like My Father Before Me build, playing with one of the AIs for Like My Father Before Me. We've got Luke and the Saber out of the Cantina early on.
Yep. So from your estimation, what are the keys to this matchup?
Well, I'm curious if Tom's playing Dainsum. I know he dislikes Dainsum in general, but that doesn't mean that he won't play him. I'm guessing he still has him in the deck, and if he can get Dainsum over there, then it's going to be a huge help. And I wonder if Brian's playing an under attack to possibly try to combat him, or even a demotion, something like that. I know a few people in the interviews discussed playing demotion and Watch Your Step in anticipation of Dainsum. So it's going to kind of come down to if either of these guys are playing the counter cards that we've heard a little bit about. I don't know. Did you have conversations with both of these players prior to the event?
I didn't talk with Brian. I did talk with Tom. And I can tell you with almost 100% certainty he is playing Dainsum. He was certainly planning on it before the event. So I would also say that, to me, one of the interesting things, he said, actually, before I get to that, I want to mention on stream, Brian Fred is fairly notorious for card signing. Many of his cards on here are signed. They have funny art on them. If you have questions about any of the cards that are... Oh, there we see one. If you have questions about what any of his cards are, feel free to mention that in chat, and we will get... we will do our best to get answers for you. We do have spies on site, and we do have deck lists, so... But anyways, as I was saying, to me, I actually agree with Tom about this matchup, which is it's unusual for an IE matchup in that this is a matchup that's really determined by Watch Your Step, where Watch Your Step decides the game's going to go. And so far, we have seen very decisively in my book, Brian Fred is choosing to make this a game on the ground. He's trying to push the damage fast, get up his activation, and set up for a bold, for bold aggressive fights. I say that right as he goes into space, of course, because he's going to make me look a fool.
Well, he's got Mirax in the skate. He could opt to put her at the Cantina for safekeeping.
I was about to say, I'm sure he's going to do that, because there's no way Mirax in the skate's going to be the start of a fight in space. That is indeed what he looks to be doing. And no surprise there.
So, Maven, do you want to just real quickly, I know we missed the beginning of this game, but just to touch on the last game, we did find out there was a misplay in the last game that resulted in that last battle. It appeared that Vic should have lost more force than he did, and we think it's because Chris may have believed Combined Flame Action was still on the table, subtracting 6 or 8 from his power. So we did confirm that that was not played correctly, and it had a fairly significant impact on the outcome, or on the current differential there. But I don't know if it would have changed the outcome, because worst case is that Akbar would have died, and he still would have had home 1 for another turn to cause all the damage and the retrieval.
Yeah, exactly. We harped on it on stream. Obviously, that was the moment that decided the game. And as I said on stream then, and I still believe, the big question and the big risk that Vic took was he was betting that if he had any evasion, which he didn't, that it would not only get through the evasion cancelers, but that there was also not an all power to weapons. So there not being the all power to weapons meant that it was only an 8 force swing. That 8 force was 7 of that 8 force comes from Akbar. 1 force wasn't going to end the game, and then he had 7 to 9 damage that he could put out the next turn, retrieve a couple of force, and then move away. And the thing about Chris Worf's Space Fleet is that it's very hard for him to chase down a ship. He can lock down a system very well, but paying to move, even just the logistics of moving 4 different ships between systems is cumbersome. Or in this case, it would have been 3 ships because Black 2 had gone lost. So it made a very big impact at the moment, but I'm not convinced, and I don't think anyone should be convinced that it would have made much impact in the game. Now back to this one, we have just seen a docking bay transit over, where Tom is now going to be sending the walkers to Tatooine to fight for the right to party. You do see Dameson along with what sure looks like Admiral Piet.
And the Emperor as well.
Ooh, double, boiling trouble. That is one heck of a combination at the docking bay.
Yeah, so that's going to shut down the drain of 3. Brian's going to have to use his Mirax to his advantage, try to find the cards that he needs to win this.
Yep. Can you see what the third card under Justice is? I see a Mahdi and a Blizzard 4.
I believe it's a Darth Vader.
Ah, that would make sense. Those are some good cards to have stacked there.
He's going to have his choice, his pick of the litter. There is not a Blizzard 4 elsewhere on table, but he usually uses the Blizzard 4 to get Danesum out, and he already has him. So not quite as important, I don't think, but still obviously a very good card.
Indeed. There are very few cards. Paying 5 for 8 power is very good.
And I have seen some builds of Tom's where he plays 2 Danesums, so it's not necessarily impossible for Fred to kill Danesum and then he still gets him back, especially since he can retrieve him with the 7 side of his objective if he flips.
Was looking really close because Brian Fred is a fantastic individual. You should always hang out with him if you can. He did a good job of showing most of his hand there as he was flipping through it. He's got quite the large one.
So just to give...
now he's being even kinder to us.
So we can see his hand. There's a barrier in there. There's a dodge in there.
They're just... sure looks like 2 moving to attack positions. A very space-heavy hand. Not a lot of answers for this ground fight. And in particular, I didn't see a smoke screen, and I didn't see an under attack.
I want to point out that the first round results were just about 50-50 with light side and dark side winning. So just one game, but pretty even so far as the meta's going.
Yeah, I tend to think that the last 2 games of the tournament are far more interesting for this than the first couple of rounds, because at the beginning there's so much sorting of new returning players facing off against veterans who just have the experience and the understanding of the current meta to just have substantial advantages. So I wouldn't read too much into it, but I have argued repeatedly in the past that, well, dark side is at the advantage. The light side, that plucky little rebellion, still has a shot. Yeah, one thing I wanted to comment on, these deck choices for these players. We've now seen 4 deck matchups. None of them are particularly surprising choices. These are all well represented from previous meta. It's certainly not a surprise to see Brian Fred playing this type of Watch Your Step deck.
Yeah, Brian's always known for playing Watch Your Step. He's been playing this, I think, for quite a while now. And Tom, as we know, loves his IE. This is his favorite build. This is the build that I expected before the event started that most people would be playing with the docking bays. And Piet out early. Xanth is asking on the stream what the meta looks like, and this is probably all we have for the moment. I don't know if you have the other deck list, though, Maven, do you?
Nope.
So we might need some help from people on site if they're able to. I know Hobby is playing and had the bye last game, so he was able to pitch in a little bit in the chat. I'm not sure if we'll be able to do that this round or not.
But I think, as we talked about before the first game, there's not... There have been very few cards that have come out since the last tournament. We have seen the next preview set come out. Those weren't designed to destroy the meta. They were designed to evolve it. I don't think we're going to see much more than that. Like, we're not going to see lots of radically different decks. I expect we're mostly going to see the same type of thing. I was interested in that last game to see that unless we missed it, there was no Poe Dondarron in the QMC deck, and that was a card that I thought was a shoo-in for the deck.
Yeah, I agree. I thought, and I think most people we interviewed agree that he had a good place in QMC, but maybe not necessarily anywhere else, and I don't think we saw him in QMC. So, it's a little interesting of a deck choice by Vic. I wonder if perhaps he didn't have the time to test with the new cards and decided didn't want to make any changes, stuck with pretty much the same deck that he played at the NPC.
Yep. That's certainly one thing. I mean, obviously that came down to Battle in Space, and boy howdy, that extra Destiny's fun. But
so it looks like Tom actually already lost an occupation. So he's probably running 2, but he's probably going to want that later on. I think it probably came from reserve deck, if I'm not mistaken.
Indeed. But I mean, I think that occupation isn't going to be the key to this matchup. He already has the Admiral's orders out, so he's pinging for that. One of the things that in discussion with several players has come up is the critical role that Admiral's orders play right now, because having your Admiral's orders out and having the right Admiral's orders out can be such an important thing behind current space strategies that that replacing your opponent's Admiral's orders can be a potentially a very large swing in a game. So if Fred is running Admiral's orders in this Watch Your Step deck, that could potentially mean a lot of things. We obviously saw Admiral's orders play become very critical to that last game.
Yeah, and speaking of Admiral's orders, we're talking right now about Tom has war and attack position now out, and he's using his force very well. This is one thing that we mentioned earlier about why it's so important and difficult to play IE very well. It's using your resources. And Tom is using his war and attack position now to deploy his pilots for cheap, and then using Commander Dasan to make them shuttle down for free. And he's saving as much as he can, being very careful about getting the proper guys out to flip, the cheapest ones out to flip, saving enough force to move around to. He's got a Tempest Scout 1 that can react, I believe, for free. And he's got Occupation, he's flipped, and he's in a pretty good spot right here, not taking any damage from the drains of the Cantina.
Yep, this is the position he wants to be in. I mean, this is the scary part about IE, right? Like, when it gets into this type of position, it can just have its way. And the tricky thing is, it's doing a very good job. It's having its way, quote unquote, with this deck, with this Watch Your Step deck. But it's put a ton of cards on table. That's 4, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 cards on table. That is a lot. That takes away a lot of your margin for error. And you compare that to Fred's deck, where he hasn't committed nearly as much to the table. And what I wanted to highlight is with that 20, that 20 cards on table bit is not only has he put a lot of cards on table, his damage potential isn't that high. He can drain for 2, 4, and ping for another 2. Granted, he's taking no damage, but he's invested quite a bit for something that's relatively disruptible.
It looks like Brian's counting cards already. He can't activate a terribly large amount.
No, this could be... We've seen Brian Fred's hand several times where he had, and I think at this point he was showing us his hand because he wasn't pleased with it. Like, he had evasion, he had an amazing hand for space, but no spaceships, no real ability to contest in space. He had all his tricks for space, but no ships, and no ground. Like, that's not pretty.
Yeah, he's actually activating 15 to 16, and he's playing a tunnel vision right now, looking through a pretty big force pile. Hopefully can find one of the cards he's looking for. Couple ships in there. Curious to see what he takes if he shows us. So what Brian's doing here is he's just recycling his Kessel every turn. His objective's letting him take it back, and he puts it back with Mirax for a little bit of card advantage.
And he's milking every bit he can out of those small elements with his deck, because he needs a miracle at this point. Like, I shouldn't say he needs a miracle. He hasn't committed very much to the board, and he hasn't lost very much yet. But he can't allow the game to continue the way it's gone. He needs to do something, and that's one of the things that's helping him. It's not doing something, but it's helping him get in the position to do something.
Yeah, and you know what else could be big here is that he's going to have to use 2 force if he wants to move, even from the Cantina, because Tom's on the 7 side of his objective now.
Yep.
And Brian does flip. With the signature, I can't see what ship he played.
Boy, howdy, that looks like there's no ship in there, and that looks just like a signature. Yeah, I'm curious if chat has any inspired ideas on what that ship is. That could... No, I've got nothing. I was thinking that could be the Outrider with a Melis on it. But I have zero confidence in that assessment.
Well, it appears did he battle here? There is a moving to attack position back there, so I feel like he'd be severely outpowered here.
Yep, but he has so much evasion for space. Like, I could see him. I could see him thinking that this is the call to make.
So there's a Captain Han. So we know that that's the Falcon now, and he hasn't
There it
initiated
is.
the battle yet. So I don't know the second pilot. Did you see the second pilot he put on there?
My guess was still Melis. Looking over his deck list, I'm gonna keep with saying it's Melis.
And so what's going to happen here is he has a few maneuvers in his hand, and he's got an all-wings report in his hand. So he's going to get 2 destinies, not 3, because of justice. And one of those destinies will be an 8. So he's going to do a pretty good job here to clear, I would say, at least 3 Imperials, even though Tom has Imperial Arrest Order out.
Indeed, that's and he's going to be immune. So he's looking at having power of 8, 10 plus 10 plus 8 plus destiny. So that's 18. We'll say with Fred, it wouldn't be surprised if the destiny's tracked. We'll say that's 23. 23 with 13 attrition. That's not a bad play.
Well, he just pulled Kessel, so he's not tracking, but he's also not deploying. So he's got an Outrider and probably Dash there as well. And so this could be a pretty big power advantage for him. And before he deployed the Outrider, I was thinking maybe he sits on it here and doesn't take the aggressive move to battle him. But now he's for sure going to be battling him.
Yeah, with the Outrider there, I mean, he's going to outpower him by quite a bit. We know he has the few maneuvers in hand. He's got the all wings in hand. And he's rapidly approaching the point where, this is a really bad position for Tom to be in. I gotta say, though, I'm kind of expecting Tom to have a good response to this. It seemed pretty obvious that Fred was putting something together the last couple of turns while Tom was setting up, and I hope that Tom didn't focus so much on setting up that 6 damage, that he forgot to come up with with further responses. And there comes the moving to attack position we knew was coming from the battle he just initiated.
Now, of course, only one of his ships is going to be fully immune here.
Yeah. And I assume it's going to be the Falcon. He's going to add another Destiny, that sure looked like. Oh, no, sorry. He spun for that. I'm being silly. Of course, he didn't.
And then he drew a Luke's Bionic Hand. So, wow, that's a massive battle destiny for him of 15.
That is what he wanted, but...
Tom drew a 5, which is only going to be enough to kill the secondary pilot on the Falcon. And I can't see all the Imperials on there, but I think he's almost for sure going to kill, I think, 3 of them. A lot of them could have a forfeit above 5. So I don't even know if 15 is going to be enough. You're right, that was a Melos that was on there. So Dasani forfeits for 5. Looks like DS615 is going to forfeit for 5. And, okay, so I saw the white bordered card.
6.
Yeah, Piet for 6. So it is Wolf Urlarin, who I was wondering was the white bordered card. It is, which means the Outrider cannot subtract from his power there. However, the 15 battle destiny means that he's going to win the battle anyway. No overflow for Tom, though. So a pretty good trade-off. Melos dies, and most of the Imperials die. And Tom's going to make him pay an extra force to move Mirax, I believe.
and then he's trampling her before she can get into the spaceship. This is a really good move from Tom. Like losing Merrick's isn't the. I would say it's not the end of the world. I've looked over, like looking at Fred's deck, knowing the type of decks Fred likes to play. He doesn't like to play a lot of characters other than Luke. That Mirrex going lost is significant. There's not a lot of other characters in this deck.
Yeah, and he looks like he drew a 3 with the Trooper. It was Corporal Drellison, so actually barely made it.
Close is close enough, I suppose. But man, that was a really having the trample and being, like you lose a battle in space, it's really easy to get tilted, to start panicking, worrying that the game's going to go really bad for you, and to miss that obvious play. And then you get put into a worse situation than them having 3 ships in space. And I'm really impressed by Tom not getting in that position, knowing that he still had ways to win this game, that there were still important things he needed to do, focusing and getting that done.
Yeah, I think they were just talking about the 7 side of the objective, making Brian pay an extra couple 4s to move. He ended up moving Luke over as well, which I'm pretty curious about that. Now, he wasn't being able to drain at the Cantina, so perhaps it doesn't hurt him. But I wonder, Maven, how is his strategy affected by not having that 3rd smuggler in space in Mirrex? He expected to have a little bit extra power and forfeit fodder up there.
I think he would have done that regardless, but no, that's not true. I'm not sure he would have done it regardless. Once Mirrex went lost, the Pulsar Skate was just forfeit fodder. There was not really any potential from his deck to put her into space, and so the appeal of moving Luke out there and having a battle there is he's got 5 forfeits sitting on top. That's not nothing. Luke can make Swiss. Luke, presumably, Fred is great at tracking, so Luke can make Swiss cheese out of the Emperor, and then, force another response there. And I really like the pressure from Fred because it forces Tom to think about 2 different locations for this next turn of places where he might potentially be weak. And, space needs a big reaction, but Luke can still do stuff on the ground. So
this is kind of a crucial point in the game for Tom, because I'm wondering, does he reinforce the Devastator a little bit more and try to fight for space, or does he just try to put all of his resources into killing Luke and possibly just barely surviving in space? It's a tough call. He's got nowhere to run, and it's pretty tough fight against Captain Han and Dash Rendar.
Yeah, we had a comment in chat that would have kept Luke at the Cantina. I obviously disagreed with that, and I think part of the reason is, if Luke gets cleared, you flip back, but it's tank Luke. If this Luke gets cleared, I think at that point the game's over. I don't think that Fred is going to have many ways of coming back. In addition to that, we have, there's 2 cards left on Justice. There's 3 Destiny in space for Lightside. So even flipping him back, it's still 2 Destiny when he's going to be drawing 1. I am going to, I'm going to assume the card's coming off of Justice and that he has an All Wings. So it doesn't actually impact the number of Destiny he's going to draw for a couple of turns. So I like the impact. Now, I want to highlight some of the things that just went down. We saw Mahdi deployed, we saw Grand Admiral Thrawn deployed, and we saw what sure looks like a very signed copy of Merrick Still, the Emperor's Reach, get deployed.
Yeah, and Tom's going to start by battling at the site to try to clear Luke. If he is successful in clearing Luke, then he'll only get 2 Battle Destinies in space, not 3. Granted, he's probably going to Justice that anyway.
And that is good enough. I suspect it was tracked. That's a 10 drawn for Destiny. Excuse me.
Yeah, and I can't tell what Fred's is. It was one of those cards he showed us earlier that has some art on it. Didn't cut out the white on it, so I can't tell what that is. Does not look like a very high Destiny, though.
There aren't that many high Destiny characters. And fewer that are virtual, because the PC knows how to design cards, folks.
And even fewer in Watcher's Step.
Indeed. If there's an Obi in this deck, I'd assume it's that. But the fast glance over the deck list says there's one Obi in the deck. I'm going to guess that that was exactly what it was. Which is rather unfortunate.
So Fred's sight is cleared. His objective flips back. And it's a big momentum shift. And, we saw all the admirals go up for really cheap up in space. And I'm not so sure that Tom even bothers battling here, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, what does he have to win in space?
He could probably clear one of the pilots in the best case, I think. And it would come at the expense of 2 of his own if Fred has another spin. And that leaves him very vulnerable next turn.
Yep. On the plus side, the objective, with Watch Your Step not being flipped, he doesn't have the ability to pull the spin from Lost Pile.
Yeah, he's playing it safe. I think that's the right move. He's just moving now, shuffling some guys around. He's still got 3 battlegrounds for next turn whenever he gets some more occupation damage in. It's Brian's got about 8 cards in hand or so. Probably not enough to really contest him on the ground anywhere, not with the reacting ATST.
Yep, that's... And the style of Watch Your Step that Brian likes to run is very low. I've said this before. It's high on tricks and low on characters. He lost that Mirrex basically to nothing, which is really devastating. He loves the Lukes. Losing the Luke is less of a problem than losing the Mirrex. The Mirrex is something that it's just hard to come back from. I wanted to ask you. I'm not 100% sure I saw it. What characters did he shuttle up into the system?
I couldn't see them all. He had to pay for them, though, so he does not have Dasani down there.
Yeah. I would have been surprised. I can take a quick look. I don't think he's running 2 Dasani, and 1 is definitely in the Lost Pile. No, he's not running 2, so he'll be paying for the rest of the game just like all us non-cheaters. And he has 2 cards in hand. I have a sneaking suspicion one of those is Close Call. That was nice of Fred to show us his reserve deck, as he showed Tom.
Can you see the character that he deployed to the Mos Espa docking bay?
Yeah, that sure looks like an OB.
Yeah, it is, you're right. So he just traded 2 cards in hand with 1 in Lost Pile and got his Luke back.
Yep.
So it's apparently a foil Obi-Wan, and he's going to the ATST site, so it's the site to attack if you're Brian, because he can't react there with anything. Anywhere else you went, you'd have to deal with the ATST and more.
Yep. It's a good move for him.
And I believe Fred has a smoke screen in hand. Is that correct? I think he showed us earlier.
He had a it looked like a smoke screen. I don't think it was earlier. I think it was a inconsequential barriers.
Okay. No, I don't see a smoke screen on his list.
That's not to say there's not one, or no. He had a dodge in hand and he had an inconsequential. So that could mean something if this battle goes awry. It's important to note that he should. Oh, never. I was going to say it's important to note that he's not flipped back, but of course he has deployed another character, which has made that no longer a true statement.
Yeah, it's a smuggler to the Tatooine Docking Bay 94. I just got a chance to look at his deck list, and he's not playing a demotion. So he doesn't really have a tech answer for Dainsum, which really forced his hand, I think. And honestly, I think it pressured him to move Luke when he probably shouldn't have, when he just kind of got cleared for nothing.
Yep. So we saw that the card that was lost there was Grand Admiral Thrawn from the ATST, which, man, I think moving the Thrawn out of space was a questionable call. And by that I mean a mistake.
So the other pilot I'm thinking is possibly a commander. So there's 3 for occupation. There's a drain of 1, there's a drain of 1, and there's 1 more for the ping. So he lost quite a bit there. A few maneuvers, tunnel vision, speak, hear me baby.
Yep.
Tom's
not a lot of... No, I was going to say, not a lot of cards here that in Fred's deck that are different from his World's deck, even. Not a lot of cards from Tom that are different from his World's deck. These two are... they're playing like it's August of 2015.
The one interesting card in Fred's list, and it's a card that I personally like a lot myself, is Unita. I think it's an underrated card. People play No Escape and Darkside almost all the time, and you think that they play it for honor, which they generally do, but I would say 95% of games it's played just to get a card back, and it's a very strong card in that case. So I never really understood why Unita wasn't played more commonly as well, because it's a very strong function to take a card back.
It is a strong function. I enjoy that as well. First time I tried testing it in a deck last summer after Joe Olson convinced me to try it out, I went on Holo Table and played a game against a guy this poor kid who was playing Ral Ops, and I was like, that was a fun game. And by that I mean it wasn't, because it's fun for me to activate 10 times more than him and be able to do anything I want. We had a question on chat about Underworld Contacts on Brian Fred's deck list. Sorry to disappoint you. He's not running that tech.
Yeah, there's really no tech cards in here for Fred. There's no Underworld Contacts. There's no Demotion. There's no Theron Net. It's a pretty straightforward deck. He's probably counting on his familiarity with it to get him by. In space there, he just drew an LSJK for Destiny, it seems.
Gotta love that. Tank Luke, run 5 copies. Nothing bad happens from 5 copies. Grimtash is not a card. Monarch is not a card.
It appears that Destiny was on the ground, actually, not in the space. Or was it?
No, I think that was in space.
Opted not to... Well, he couldn't play the All Wings from Lost Pile, considering he's got 1 card stacked on a useless gesture already, and it appears he only has 1 card saved in his force. So he loses the Outrider and Dash, I believe.
Yep. And boy, this is... Yep, that's game. No surprise there. I'm not 100% sure. This might be card for card what Fred played at Worlds, and he might just not have been had time or thought that this deck was still good enough for the meta. And Dainsum entering into common play in IE shows the danger that you don't need very many cards different, but his deck didn't really have an answer to TTO, and his deck didn't really have an answer to the Dainsum entanglements, and or at least not the. Maybe he has a specific game plan for TTO and a way to get that game to work. He certainly has power to battle through in space, but that was really rough game for Brian Fred.
Yeah, it was over pretty quickly. He didn't really waste any time either scooping whenever he saw that it was kind of a lost situation. And I am disappointed that he didn't play some of the tech cards, because everyone talked about Dainsum coming into the tournament as potentially being a problem. And if you're going to play Watch Your Step, I really think you have to have an answer for him, and he really didn't. And I think that swung the game, is because he had to move Mirax out, lost Mirax, had no answer for LSJK sitting at the cantina, not really doing much for him, and I think he panicked a little bit, and I think he moved him out when he shouldn't have. He had to waste an entire turn playing the Luke back. I didn't like it, and I think if he had an answer for it, Underworld Contacts or Demotion in particular, I think he would have been in a much better situation right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are two very good cards. I'm not convinced those are the only ways Watch Your Step can go about this. Like, more than almost any other deck, Watch Your Step has the ability to explode with multiple destinies. It also has the ability to bleed through a Justice and then just destroy Dancem or end the game. I think he had a lot of that. That certainly would have been a very different deck from what Fred ran with. He's today running, a very Brian Fred style deck, and he's an extremely good player. We saw him make some really good choices there in this game. The one that I liked the most was the one that actually hurt him the most was moving the Luke out. Xanth called out in chat that he thought that was a mistake. He thought it was a mistake. I thought it was brilliant. It ended up being a mistake. So, what can you do?
If we could actually backtrack, I've just been reading the results on the forums, and we did get clarification on the first game. If you were watching then, it was the Vic and Chris Werf's game, and Vic actually lost that game on time. I did not think that game lasted an hour already, but it did. So it was 14-11 on time, Vic lost, which explains a lot about why Chris just spread out and kind of took that damage for that one turn. He still had enough to win the game on time. So despite the error that occurred that we saw with the misplay in space, it was a timed victory for Chris Werfs in that game.
Wow, that's incredible. That's
I mean, how did the game feel to you that first? And it didn't feel like a full hour, did it?
No, I mean it didn't. But we are